that's why someone that hasn't never studied and has no skills and no experience, like myself, could get into a role over somebody that does have those qualifications. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to university. I'm not even qualified in HR, even though I've been working in it for over 10 years. And I've worked for some big brands and some small brands like Sky, Coca-Cola, British Airways, Gumtree, eBay, etc. And I think for me, I was like, I want to survive. I want to eventually move out and get my own place and stuff like that. So I need to get the money to support that. To me, this is not the kind of society where you really want to be struggling financially. It's I've been there. Not being able to pass an interview sounds like kind of a small thing, but some of the stories that I've heard from people who can't pass interviews are really, really distressing. Understanding the importance of the interview performance is the key. There are certain things that they want to hear and you need to say them. As soon as they reframe it, they can get into a job that pays 30 or 40 or 60 or 80K. And I'm like, that's a life-changing difference.
What are some things that you shouldn't do? Absolutely. Like, even if it's a great interview, it's just going to kill your chances. Welcome to the Takeoff Experience, where I sit down with highly driven people to talk about their journey, their failures, and their successes. If you want to take off in your career, your business, your finances, or your mindset, then this podcast is for you. Welcome back to the Takeoff Experience. We have a special guest in the building. Amri, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you very much.
How has your day been?
It's been busy. It's been very busy. Scripting, doing all my YouTube stuff, some research, editor conversations, nothing majorly interesting, but very busy.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Awesome. So to give the listeners and watchers a background, who is Amri?
I am an interview coach and I'm also a recruitment and HR specialist as well. And I'm a YouTuber now as well. It feels weird saying that, but I'm also a YouTuber. So I post YouTube videos on interview advice, interview tips, a little bit of career advice mixed in, but it's mainly about how to pass a job interview because so many people struggle with that. And with everything that's happening with jobs and redundancies and everything that people are experiencing, it just seems really relevant and helpful at the moment.
Yeah, and I feel like the interview that's the stage that's gonna get you the job. Of course, you've got the application, but that's the make or break that's gonna get you the job and get you a decent salary if you're looking one and get your bills paid, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I am a big believer that the focus on CVs or resumes is a bit much. I don't think that you need an overly complicated resume or CV. That's the main mistake I see when I look at someone's CV. It's more about getting to the interview because that is where they determine whether or not they want you. You can be amazing on paper, but if you get into the interview and you are not as strong as somebody else who is, then it's that interview performance. It's actually, I know it's a bit controversial, but skills, experience, and qualifications, I've always said they don't matter. Sorry if you have studied for years and years. I'm not saying that what you've done is pointless, but you need to know how to use it in an interview. You need to know how to demonstrate that in an interview. And that's where a lot of people struggle. So that's why someone that hasn't never studied and has no skills and no experience, like myself, could get into a role over somebody that does have those qualifications. Because I left school with terrible GCSE results.
Really?
Terrible GCSE results. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to university. I'm not even qualified in HR, even though I've been working in it for over 10 years. And I've worked for some big brands and some small brands like Sky, Coca-Cola, British Airways, Gumtree, eBay, etc. Lots more. And I'm not qualified, and I also have a learning disability as well. So I've struggled with dyscalculia for a long time. It's basically dyslexia, but with numbers. This is the easiest way to describe it. I didn't know when I started out that I had that, but I started to learn what people wanted and what they were listening out for in job interviews. And I started to build that. And once friends and family started to see me going into these big brands, they're like, how are you getting, you've got no discernible talent. How are you getting in there? And it's like, well, listen, really. But the thing is, I didn't really have anything to show. I pretty much had, just me. I was a nursery nurse when I started out in like 2002, I think. Did that for a few years. And then I went into the corporate world and people were like, how did you do that? And it's like, it literally is just a case of trial and error along the way, but understanding the importance of the interview performance is the key. It's a shame that it is a performance. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But when you master that, if you want to get into a six-figure job, then you could.
Okay.
But you also need to remember that you then need to deliver at a six-figure level. So
Yeah, yeah, that's the most important. You can get through the door, but you can't be a faker. You
Exactly.
have to
Exactly.
actually perform. Wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow. Wanted to go back into your story. So, I think offline you said that your parents are African, right?
No, they're Jamaican.
Oh, they're Jamaican.
No, my parents.
You mentioned African
Yeah,
name.
my name's African. So
Oh,
yeah, but it's we my brothers and sisters, we all have African names.
okay.
So my dad is very much a going back to Africa person, like very much
Oh,
Africa
okay.
focused. So, but we're Jamaican. I mean, you could argue that we're all African, which is,
Yeah,
and so in
true.
that sense, yes, when we trace our names back, it's Ghana. So Ghana is really where I originate from, and I do really want to go there.
Oh,
I haven't
nice,
been, so
nice.
yeah.
Yeah, Ghana is. I hear some great things about it. What's stopping you from going as of yet?
Nothing actually, probably the pandemic.
Yeah,
Yeah, now that it's over, I can focus on like what my next holiday is going to be. So
yeah,
I really want to go there
yeah.
because I just want to. I want to see what a different kind of country is like. Where
Mhm.
you know, born and raised in this country, I've
Yeah,
only ever been on holidays in other places. I want to actually go and see what it might be like as a
yeah,
potential place to, you know, settle in future.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's. I mean, I've only been to Nigeria. I haven't been to Ghana.
Okay.
It's nice. Yeah, it's
Are
good.
you? So where are your parents from?
Nigeria.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Nigeria and
Okay.
Sierra Leone. I don't know if the listeners watch it. Do they know the Sierra Leone part? Yeah, Nigeria and
Okay.
Sierra Leone. Yeah,
Okay.
mom's Nigeria, Sierra Leone. Dad's Nigeria. So yeah, no, it's nice. You're it's interesting going to a country where you're the majority. Let's just put it like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably don't think about it too much, but it's different. Life is
Yeah.
different
I've
there,
been
you
to
know.
Gambia.
Okay.
I've been to Gambia for
Yeah.
yeah, and that was amazing. I didn't want to leave. It
Yeah.
was amazing. And it did feel different.
Yeah.
But I feel like people could still see I was a tourist. It's like that when I go to Jamaica.
They
Like before I
they
even open
know,
my
right?
mouth, they know.
Yeah.
So I'm still not necessary, but it still feels more like,
Yeah.
okay, so this is what it would be like if I was indigenous to where I was born.
Mhm.
Like, this experience. And it was
Yeah.
nice. It was
Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing. So you mentioned school. You said that you said you did do well in GCSEs. What did you get?
Oh,
You end
come
up
on.
getting?
Why? I mean, okay. I'm talking
You don't have to tell me all the
D's. Oh,
grades,
no, no,
yeah.
no. I don't even remember because this was
Really?
like over 20 years ago.
Mm.
So, like D's and E's, and
Mm.
I got an A in English.
Okay.
English has always been, for some reason,
Yeah.
it's really odd, is that most people who have dyscalculia also have dyslexia. Like that's more the rule.
Mm.
For some reason, I don't have that, so I only have dyscalculia. When it comes to English, I'm like just really strong in
Amazing.
it.
Yeah.
Don't know why, but that's yeah. So A in English, but everything else just bad grades, like D and above or
Yeah.
below, if you will.
Was it that school wasn't for you? Did you enjoy school, you think?
I think aspects of school seemed I couldn't really understand the why. Like I couldn't
Okay.
articulate that then. I was just young
Yeah.
and going through the motions. But a lot of it, I think it just didn't sink in the right way.
Mhm.
The structure and how it's taught didn't really speak to me.
Yeah.
So I just didn't soak in a lot of the information, and I just thought I'm just not smart. That's
Yeah.
just I kind of accepted that that's what it was, or
Yeah.
that's what I thought it was, until once I started to go into corporate environments and
Mm.
deliver and like go in and save them like 150K in my first year and do
Yeah.
things like that, I was like, oh, I can deliver.
Mhm.
And so I was like, something's not, there must be something else.
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering because so obviously that happened at GCSE. Did you mention that you went to university as well?
No, I didn't.
You didn't go to.
I didn't go to
So
university or college.
was it okay? So you didn't do college. Did you end up working? Started
I
work?
ended up working and I
Yeah.
did an NVQ. So I
Okay.
did an NVQ in
I think
childcare.
I can remember.
It's one of those vocational things
Yeah.
that I did qualify in that. So I'm a qualified nursery nurse. If I ever
Okay.
decide to go back into it, I
Yeah.
loved doing it. But growing up in London meant that 9K a year is not going to get you much.
That was the salary.
Nursery nurses get paid a shockingly low salary.
Is
It
that minimum? That's not minimum wage, is it?
No, it wasn't, because I started the job.
Yeah.
I think this is. I can say this now that the nursery's like no longer there, but
Yeah.
I think this is why they took us on at that age. Take you on at 15,
Yeah.
so just when you get your national insurance card,
Right.
and
Okay.
so they can pay you below. Basically, there's like a different set of
Wow.
minimum wage for
Okay.
under a certain age gap.
Yeah.
I think today you have to be 16. I think,
Yeah.
or 18. I can't remember,
Okay.
but yeah, so
Wow.
that was, it was more money than I'd had, because I
Yeah.
was doing a paper round before that.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
was like,
Oh.
but I think I bought trainers and something else, and I
Oh.
was like, oh wow, I got £275 in a check, and I was
Yeah.
like, this is amazing, because I was
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Thought, this
Yeah.
is great,
Yeah.
£275.
That's
But
crazy.
yeah, then I realized within a couple of years that
Yeah.
that couldn't pay rent.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's not
yeah,
it's not enough. And you know what's crazy, right? Like I don't know if a nursery nurse still exists, but nurseries itself and childcare and all that is, I think a lot of it's privatized and it's expensive.
shockingly
It's,
expensive.
it's expensive,
It's
right?
so expensive.
Yeah.
It's like I was working in the nursery that my brother was in, so I was working there at the same time, and it was, I think, up to 6 months. It was, I can't remember now. Was it like 3 grand or something, and then
Yeah.
maybe 2 grand? It's a full like month salary for some people. I don't know
Basically,
how.
yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Having children is
It
expensive.
is. It is.
Um,
It is very, very expensive.
so it's the idea that the nursery nurses, you work really long shifts.
Hmm.
If the child gets sick, you get sick. Like there was, I remember one of the nursery nurses got ring, sorry to thing, but they got ringworm because a child got ringworm.
Oh my god.
You get sick if a child gets sick.
Mm.
You get, you know what I mean? You are changing nappies all day. And so I was like, I think that they should be paid more, but there's so many roles in
Yeah.
this kind of society that should be paid more than they get paid.
Yeah. Agreed.
So
Fully
yeah.
agreed. So okay, so you realized that obviously salary wasn't going to be enough. What was like the next step for you at that point?
I think the next step was looking at what jobs paid more.
Okay.
And I just looked at, I was looking online, and I was like, a lot of my friends stayed in childcare, and they were like, I want to move up. I want to get, because you got level 2, they wanted to get their level 3 and stay in that. And I think for me, I was like, I want to survive. I want to eventually move out and get my own place and stuff like that. So I need to get the money to support that. And I looked at corporate jobs, and I saw one at a hydraulics hose company. That was like my first job, called Pertec, and I went there to interview. So I think I got some tips from my sister, and I went there to interview. And I remember that I had a cold, so I kept blowing my nose. I ran out of tissues. I had to ask them tissues. I remember that my phone went off. So my Nokia 3210
Yeah, I
with
remember
a changeable face.
Yeah.
I remember the ringtone and everything, the one that you had to get from the back of the
Yeah.
magazine. So that rang, and I remember seeing something somewhere that said, remember to switch off your phone, otherwise you will not get the job. Like, you have to. And I was just like, that's it, this interview's over. And so I was really shocked when I got the job. And when I got into the job, I asked my boss, why did you hire me? Because I thought the interview went really badly. And she said, you knew more about the company than I did. She was like, you did so much research that I was shocked. And she said, and you were so enthusiastic. She was like, you were so happy. You put me in a really good mood, even though it was a really bad day. And so she was like, yeah, thought you seemed like fun. And so that was, and so I was like, so I started to realize that, so it's not just about the rigid rules. There are other things that people want to see. And it also pushed me into being interested in psychology. Like, how do human beings make decisions? Why do they make decisions that seem illogical? And I realized that people make emotionally based decisions, and I learned a lot. It's why you'll see, like, on X Factor, they'll have like a contestant who they'll play all the music, and they'll say, oh, this person, they have a really bad leg and a bad eye, and they'll do all the whole story. And then that contestant will go on to win, or the public will love them, even though they can't really sing that well. And I used to think, but that's not, that they can't really sing that well, because I'm in a family where a lot of people are in entertainment and music and singing. And I realized that people make so they mess with that psychology in order to control your decision. They want to push you towards this candidate. They want to push you towards this person. And I started to realize that there are certain, almost like lights. I said there's like 10 lights when you're in an interview, and you have to hit those lights, each one. And some of them are based on what the manager is looking for in the job. So when they write that job description, they're like, I really want to find this person. You hit each of those lights. And then once you've passed those, you hit the emotional lights as well. And then once you've gone past that, then you're a lot more likely to to get an offer,
Okay.
basically.
Wow.
It's not necessarily manipulation, because
Yeah.
what I always encourage people to do is make sure that you're telling the truth.
Mm.
So you're telling them about things that telling them about skills you really have. You're just framing them in a way that is most attractive and allows you to sell yourself. And also make sure that you really want the job and that you really connect with the person.
Yeah.
Do not just go into a job for the sake of it. Don't get a salary for the sake of it.
Mhm.
You will be miserable, guaranteed. I've done it before.
Yeah.
And so you're basically just positioning yourself in the most attractive way.
Yeah.
If there are things you don't have, don't say you do. Do not lie. And that's pretty much it. So you're just kind of, because the irony is the candidates that get the job, they're doing that anyway. They just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like when you meet someone, you know, let's say you're on a date, you're not going to tell them about all the terrible things about yourself. You're going to start with all the best things, and you're interested in someone who seems really interested in you. They're not like, you know, I just wanted to meet a guy, any guy, you're a guy, so I'm just here. Do you know what I mean? Like they're you know, they're like, I was really interested in you because of this. Same thing with a job.
Yeah.
I liked this company because of this. You seem like you would be really great to work with. I'm interested in learning from you. That is, if you are, you don't necessarily need to use the compliments if it's not true, but it helps. So
Awesome. Amazing. 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 I actually had a question. Why did you feel, because they said that you knew more about the company. What was it that what drove you to be like, yeah, I'm gonna study all of this about the company. I'm gonna be so enthusiastic about it. I'm just
I mean,
curious
I
about
think
it.
I'm naturally enthusiastic
Mm.
as a person, but I kind of thought like an interview is kind of a pressurized situation. It can be a bit stressful. It can be a bit nerve-wracking, and it can be anywhere from half an hour to maybe 2 hours or maybe 3 at max. What is the point in going through all of that, brushing off your suit, getting all prepped, going all the way there in some cases, unless you're doing a Zoom interview, and going through all of that to not get the job? And so I'm like, I would rather put in however many hours prep, get the job, secure the salary, and then I'm there for however many years. I don't need to think about it for
Yeah.
however long I choose to stay in that company, rather than like, oh, I'm gonna do it half-hearted and then go to 10 interviews. Why? Like,
Yeah.
go to, like, do all the prep, go to 1 or 2 or 3. They will be fighting for you. They'll offer you maybe 10% more than you would have got if you did a half-hearted approach. And then you just pick the one you want instead of going to tons and tons and tons of
Yeah.
interviews. And the more rejections you get, it kind of does something psychologically, and it just lowers your the amount of people that I've spoken to. I do Zoom calls with my subscribers,
Mhm.
and they're like, my self-worth is at 0. Like, the things that people have told me are so distressing because of the fact that they're getting rejections. They said it starts to feel personal, and I'm like, I will. My view is, go through the steps you need to go to nail it one time, and then you're at a point. You'll get to a point where you'll see a job and you're like, that's the job I want,
Mm.
and you can just go for that job.
Mm.
Like, I've called places where they weren't actually hiring and encourage them to consider this role. Like, I can do this. Have you considered this role?
Mhm.
And just go for that thing and do all the prep you need to convince them.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit cold because I'm always
No, it's
so
okay.
my
It's
hands are
okay.
like shaking, but yeah.
Gosh,
Yeah.
wow. That's insane. Okay, I wanna continue going through your story because I find it fascinating. So you worked at a what do you say, motorboat company? What was it?
Oh, hydraulics hose company. Oh yeah.
Hydraulic hose. Because I was like,
Close,
it's so
motorboats,
specific.
hoses.
It was so like specific.
It's like the
Okay,
AA but for industrial trucks.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what did you move on to from after that point?
After that, I moved on to, I'm trying to remember, because basically for most of my career I've worked contract,
Okay.
which means that there's been periods of time where I've done 3 or 12-month contracts.
Mhm.
That's a lot of jobs in my career. And so what that means is sometimes I can't remember all the places I've
Yeah.
been.
Fair
But
enough.
I'm pretty sure from there I might have gone on to Coca-Cola, because I know I was 19 when I worked at Coca-Cola. So I think it was around, I went to Coca-Cola, then British Airways. So
Wow.
after that I went into Coca-Cola. I met with a lady there, and she said the same thing. So I think I had this habit of asking people after they'd hired me why they hired me.
Mm.
I didn't realize that I did that until I thought back on it. But actually, I also asked her, I remember Chantal, she was my boss, and she said the same thing. She's like, you seem like fun to work with, you had great energy, you did all the
Mm.
prep, etc. Um, and so I got in there by doing the same thing, but with the job. Ironically, I didn't have any information about the company. So I didn't know it was Coca-Cola until I turned up to the building. For some bizarre reason, the agency that I went to didn't tell me that was that was the company they would put
Yeah.
me forward to. They just gave me the address, 1 Queen Caroline Street,
Yeah.
went there, and I was like, they're not even there anymore. They were in Hammersmith. But yeah, and then I just did crazy prep on the job. Like, what are the skills that I've got that can match with the job? What are the skills that I haven't got, but I can think of transferable skills? So skills that I've gained in other areas of my life, projects I've worked on, things I'm interested in that could transfer into the role.
Mm.
And that seemed to work. So yeah.
I mean, I would say you're definitely way ahead of your time when with all of this, which is why I think it seemed natural for you to become an interview coach. And I guess the question I have is, what was like the drive? What created that change in you, do you think? Have you ever thought about it?
I think it was gradual, if I'm completely honest,
Yeah.
because I had friends. First, it was friends and family. Like, someone would say, "Oh, you're working in this industry," and then they're like, because I actually, bizarrely enough, worked in finance.
Okay.
You'd think it would be a bad decision for somebody who doesn't understand numbers,
Yeah.
but I was curious as to what that job would entail, and I had realized that I had a knack for passing interviews,
Yeah.
which sometimes isn't a good thing because too much choice can also be an issue. But so I went into that industry, and so they were like, "How are you doing this?" And I was like, I'm just preparing for the interview. I'm just doing, in my mind, what everyone does." But they were like, "We don't do that."
Yeah.
So then they're like, "Can you help me?" And I just was like, "Sure, let me help you." And we do practice interviews. We do, like, I'd run through their CV, and I started to do that for friends, family, and then they would say, "Oh my God, I got hired at this place, that place, da da da," or "I got an interview at Google," or whatever. And so then I was like, I think I should create a course, because I didn't actually want to do YouTube at all. I wanted to create a course and put it on Skillshare or
Yeah.
whatever the platform. I think it was like Udemy or whatever was around at the time. But in order to create the course, I thought, well, where am I going to promote it? Like, where am I going to get people to do the course? And I was like, looked into YouTube. I was like, I can do it on YouTube. So I was going to do a channel, but without me on camera, because I don't really like being on camera. I don't like pictures and things like that. So I was like, I'll just do voiceover. But there's one massive channel that does interview coaching, that does interview questions and answers, and they were off camera. So I was like, I'm going to have to differentiate myself from that channel. So I'll go on camera for that reason. But then once I was on camera, I realized that my videos where I was off camera didn't do very well. So I was like, my audience is obviously used to that now. So I'm going to have to keep going.
They're used to your face.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to keep, yeah. So,
Gosh.
and yeah. But
Man.
yeah, it's really, yeah, it's really, really weird. I think one of the things at the moment is I'm thinking about, like, things are changing really rapidly. And I'm thinking about how I can adapt what I do to suit that. So we were talking about AI a little bit
and ChatGPT
before. And I'm like, because you are in, well, what you say tech,
yeah,
that means a million different things to me, because I know there's so many niches.
There's so many niches.
So when you say you're in tech, what's your specialism?
My special that's an interesting thing. I will say I'm probably a bit more generalist, but in terms of the experience I had, that I guess the listeners, watchers would understand, I guess web development. So
Okay.
so I would be like a product manager.
Oh yeah,
to
okay,
develop a
okay.
website or some form of products, basically.
Okay, fine,
Yeah.
fine. So I think that the main thing is thinking about, like, things have changed so drastically. So even before the pandemic, there was something else. There was some other big wave. I don't know if it was GDP. I think there was another drop in, like, another wave of redundancies or something. Then it picked up. Then there was the pandemic, and it's kind of made me think about, like, in terms of where people are at now, there's loads of redundancies.
Yeah.
And kind of like one of the questions that you asked me before we went live is now a good time to move? My view has always been that yes, it's always a good time, but how can I explain it? As somebody who, I don't see interviews as an obstacle.
Yeah.
I always see it as a good time to move, because I'm like, you can move whenever you like, as long as you just decide that this is what you want, you do the right prep, and then you go and get that thing. I can appreciate that there are some society-led pressures and factors that might mean that there might be more advantageous times. But I very rarely believe that. So I'm the kind of person who I think that December is a great month to find a job
Why,
because
why December?
there's less competition.
Yeah.
Like company, if somebody leaves a company, they still need to hire, they still need to fill that job.
Yeah.
But in December, no one's applying. So when you apply, you stand out a lot more.
That's true.
So I've always, like, a lot of my jobs I've started in December. I just prefer the quick process that you go through because they'll jump on you straight away because there's just less competition. Like and so kind of like now when people are like, oh, is it a good time to move? Probably it's a good time.
Yeah.
It just depends on how you see it.
Yeah.
And if you are going to move, make sure that you do your prep and you prep. I'm a prep person. Prep for
It
interviews.
sounds like it, yeah.
Prep for my YouTube channel. Before I
Yeah.
started my channel, I did a course that I mentioned to you before.
Yeah.
And I was like, I try not to waste time because to me, time is so much more valuable than money. So I'm all about like trying to get things in the most efficient way.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna go for something, then make sure that you're prepared.
Yeah.
That's my view. So
Where does the methodical approach come from?
I have no
You
idea.
don't have no
Do
idea.
you know what? I don't know
Is
because
it just always been like efficiency?
thing is, I don't know. I can't even say that. I don't know.
No, it's cool. No, I'm trying to understand because we were talking about Chat GPT
Yeah.
offline and how that's been a game changer for you, and how you're using that to like streamline all the areas. And now you're talking about like not wasting time. Time very valuable for you. So it's always interesting to just understand like
Yeah.
valuing time, because I'm like that as well. I like to be as efficient as possible. If I do something, I always think, okay, how can I do that in less time and not waste? Like, I don't mind wasting it the first time, but
Yeah.
the second, third, fourth, I don't, how can I
Yeah.
just make it a little bit easier
Yeah.
than,
I mean, I think it comes from. This is gonna sound really like I'm really simplifying it here, but looking and learning. So I was really, really quiet as a child. Very, very shy, very, very quiet. For some reason, I'm not like that as an adult. And I noticed that the society that we're in, particularly in the UK, we're in a capitalist society. We're in a society that rewards you for being in a certain way. So it's like, if I'm going to choose to stay in this society, then there are certain things that I need to do to make things advantageous for myself. And when I looked at what works, whether it be a personality type, whether it be a certain way of approaching things, I noticed that there were certain things that seemed to work better.
Mhm.
And I noticed that, like, particularly working in sales, I realized how quickly money can come and go. Like, I can get money back. If I lose money in sales, my mindset was I can always just make more sales, earn it back. But time is just gone. You can't get it back. It's just gone. It's so valuable. And so I kind of was like, everything I do, I want it to be efficient.
Yeah.
Because I want to enjoy as much of my life as possible. Because we spoke about a YouTuber before. I won't say who it was, but we're speaking about it before. That person told me that they still edit their videos, and I was shocked because they're so successful. They're doing so much. But to me, it seemed inefficient. And I was surprised because I was like, this person has actually inspired me. They've given me tips and advice and da-da. But I was like, why? Why do you do that? Like, even though getting an editor was very uncomfortable for me, because most people say the same thing about editing. No one can do it exactly like I can do it.
Yeah,
like,
I
I know
always
where
think
I
that.
want to cut it and I know where.
True.
But it's so. I was watching a podcast with Mr. Beast and Coffeezilla, like, and basically he was talking about getting an editor and scaling. And I realized that doing things any other way is ridiculous. If I'm saying that I want to get more time to spend with my family, to go out and go to a roller disco or whatever it is that I feel like doing, then I can't be stuck in the day-to-day of stuff. Otherwise, I won't even have the headspace to decide that I want to take things in a different direction. And so I've kind of taken that approach. Even in my day jobs in recruitment, I kind of try to take that approach as well. And so I think that's where it's come from. It's just by seeing what works in this society, in this societal structure, and deciding that I want to try and be financially secure. Like
Okay.
this, to me, this is not the kind of society where you really want to be struggling financially.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. The way it
I've
is
been
right
there.
now. Yeah.
It's I've heard some heartbreaking stuff from people that struggle. And so I kind of want to try and everyone protect myself and my family from that. Everybody wants to do that. And so I feel like this is the best way is to do things methodically and efficiently.
Okay. Awesome. Amazing. I wanted to ask you a question actually about YouTube. So you mentioned that initially you didn't want to, show your face, and then you ended up showing your face. Do you feel like that had a benefit for you being on camera? Do you feel like you've had, yeah, like any
Yeah, I
benefit
mean, I've
from?
noticed the benefit. There's been a lot of benefits actually. I mean, I have gotten over the discomfort. It's still there in the back of my head, but I accept that in order to get where I need to get to, this is what I
Mm.
need to do, be on camera. So just get over it. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what I tell myself
Yeah.
when I'm feeling like that. But there are times when I'm like, oh, I don't like this.
You
Um,
cringe about it.
yeah, just cringe. But one of the benefits was that, like, for example, and this is not like a self promo thing, but I've been
Mm.
accepted into the creator class for
Yeah, we were going to talk
2023.
about that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, well, I know that part of the reason for that is that I'm on camera because it's a creator class for Black community
Yeah.
in the UK. Well, they select 4 different like regions, but UK is one of them. And had I not been on camera, that opportunity may not have come in. I'm the only person that I know of in the interview advice space on YouTube, and I mean specifically interview questions and answers, that is Black and female. And what I noticed is people commenting on that. So other people in other parts of the world, Mozambique, US, like Black women commenting that that they wanted to see representation, which I didn't really realize was as important as it was until I started to see those comments.
Yeah.
And so I realized that actually I'm helping people in more ways than one. And so it's not just about, my comfort. It's also about the impact that I'm making for other people. Because otherwise things are just rubbish if you're not doing anything
Yeah.
to help other people. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah.
How did that feel for you? Like, what did it mean to you to be part of, YouTube Black? That's what it's called, right? It's called
Yeah,
YouTube Black. Yeah, yeah.
it's
Creator Class,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, YouTube Black Creator Class. I still am in shock. I'm telling myself get over it in my head, but I'm still like, I still don't fully understand. Like I'm like, what? I feel like asking them what was the selection criteria. Sorry,
Yeah.
because my channel's still quite small. I'm not like my videos don't generally go viral. You have people like Big Shaq was
Yeah.
in the creator class.
Oh, was
Like,
he?
yeah, he
Oh,
was in like the first year because this is the
okay.
third year they've run it,
Wow.
and
That's
I don't think they're
crazy.
going to run it forever. They're only running it for a short period of
Oh,
time.
mad.
So he was in one, like Cat Black, who's another channel that I watch sometimes. She's massive. And so most of the channels seem quite large. So I didn't really understand why I was in there because I was like, I'm proud of what I do and I'm proud of the impact that I've had in helping people pass interviews and things. But I just thought that they would have gone for a bigger channel. So I'm still got that kind of a little bit of imposter syndrome in my head. Like
Mm.
when I'm in like workshops and things with other big creators and it's like, like I'm just there. But it feels amazing, amazing. I don't want to waste this opportunity, so I'm going to try and make sure that I do as much as I can while I'm inside this program.
Yeah.
And hopefully, when I get out, by the time I get out the other end, I'll be in a position where I can reach even more people who are struggling because not being able to pass an interview sounds like kind of a small thing, but some of the stories that I've heard from people who can't pass interviews are really, really distressing. So there was a girl that I did a Zoom call with when I was doing market research, and she was just basically suffering with severe depression
Mm.
because she went to a coding academy and she paid $20,000, and when she finished the coding academy, she couldn't get a job in that industry, and I was like, what they should have taught you in that coding academy is how to get into a job, like not just the theory of how to do the job.
Yeah.
That's what most people study and learn. They learn the theory of how to do something. And if you can't pass an interview, you either won't get the job or you'll get the job, but you won't get the salary. And you've put the time and effort and money into studying that qualification. So you should be able to get into something after that. There was a lady who, like, her husband like left her for someone younger, and she basically was like, I can't pay the mortgage. I can't look after my dogs. We had 3 dogs. He's left them with me. I have no skills, and I wouldn't even know where to begin with an interview. Like I'm so far down on skills. That's how she felt. And I just thought, like, there were so many people sending me messages like that when I reached out about market research, because I
Mhm.
reached out to my subscriber list,
Yeah.
my email list, and some of the stuff was just like, they're just hitting a barrier at that point. So they're like, I'm going to do a customer services job. But I'm like, they've got amazing experience. And as soon as they reframe it, they can get into a job that pays 30 or 40 or 60 or
Yeah.
80K. And I'm
Wow.
like, that's a life-changing difference.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's why an interview is so important. It's like, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, I just want to make sure that I learn everything I can to make my content more engaging, reach more people, and just level the playing field. Because this whole thing of interviews being a performance, it totally isn't fair.
Mm.
Like, I get that that's how they do it, but I'm like,
What
it
do you mean
just feels,
performance? Like,
it's a performance. It's, you
yeah.
go in,
Yeah.
there are certain things that they want to hear, and you need to say them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of, it is a performance. It's not necessarily a false,
Yeah.
but it's still a performance. You're
Yeah.
still putting on the best side of yourself. Kind of like I was saying before with a date, you put on the best. You're not going to talk about your disgusting habits
Yeah.
or the fact that you're lazy or whatever, like, you know, or whatever it is. You're just going to talk about the things that you think that person wants to hear. Well, not really that person wants to hear, but the best parts of yourself. You're probably going to put that forward.
Yeah.
And an interview is the same. They kind of don't really want to hear about all of the worst parts of yourself, or the fact that you only want this job because you want somewhere that's 10 minutes from your house. They really want to hear about they want to hear about your skills that match with the role, your the parts of your values and ethos that match with the company's. So that's what you need to focus on, but you want to do it in a way that's enthusiastic and memorable and engaging and persuasive. That is a performance. Most people aren't thinking like that with everything that they say. They're not like, let me make sure I'm persuading, let me make sure I'm engaging them, let me make sure. But I'm like, talk about who you genuinely are, but you need to do it in a way that is engaging to them, so they want to choose you. And that's quite performative to me.
Yeah. It can be quite difficult. And you know, when you were telling me the stories about some of you know, your audience, I think a lot of us kind of take it a little bit for granted, like how significant you know, getting a job is for some people, right? I didn't even, you know, when I was thinking about interviewing, I think maybe I was being a bit naive and thinking, oh, you know, people have several options, but some people only have the one or two. And like we were saying, it's make or break. So no, it's very important work that you're doing, and I'm sure it's very, very appreciated and you know, valued. But yeah, again, it's not something you don't think about
No.
how distressed people are actually after the interview. Like you said, some people really get down about it. And I actually wanted to talk to you about some of did were you successful at all your interviews? And if you weren't, how did you pick yourself back up and make sure that you could overcome that barrier, for instance?
Um so before I answer that, I just
Yeah.
wanted to go back to something I remembered,
Yeah.
which was a lady I spoke to that lived in Mozambique.
Hmm.
She I did a call with her, and she said that where she lived, there was one big company. I can't remember, she said, like, I'm thinking power plant, but it maybe wasn't. It was something else, some massive like company that was there. And it was the only company where they could work. And I can't remember if that was just due to proximity or somewhere else. But what it meant is that if some of the people there couldn't pass interviews, they couldn't work. And I was like, and because I've grown up in the UK, in London, which is like, there's so many jobs in London. I never thought about that kind of reality where there's kind of one or two places, one or two options. Like you just said, when you said one or two options, it just sparked that memory. So yeah, so I just was like wanted to like back up what you were saying, basically, that it's people all around the world that I've had people in different countries, in you know, in Korea, in like all sorts of people that are struggling, and in some of them they face these different barriers that are society led. Yeah, sorry, you asked me another
No,
question.
no,
I
it's
totally
fine, it's
forgot
fine.
what it
No,
was.
to be fair, I kind of want to like stick to this
But
what we're talking about, because it is you know, again, I think sometimes it's a privilege that you forget you have, when you just said what you said about Mozambique, again, it's not that you don't know. It's you just
Mm,
don't think about it. You just don't think actually, yeah, some people is literally one option, and if they
yeah,
don't get that option,
yeah. It's just
pretty
it,
much.
yeah. And she said I always remember because she was so enthusiastic,
Yeah.
and she said that her son, she wants him to be a footballer, and she said her dream was to go to Old Trafford. And I was so shocked
Okay.
because I was like, oh, like she's like,
Yeah.
okay, fair enough. And I'm like, the impact of even the society that you live in all around the world
Yeah.
is amazing. But one of the things she also said to me was, and I felt kind of not maybe a bit not guilty, but just self-aware. She said the only thing is my accent because she had a really strong accent.
Yeah.
And she said, with you and how you articulate things, and I realized that just the way that I sound does make a difference as well, of
Mhm.
course. But I don't think about that. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I still face other I still have faced some other barriers, but
Mhm.
the way you sound, the way I sound, which
Yeah.
is why we can get into some of the brand name companies that
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so um there are just so many things. Like she's also focusing on articulation, learning another language, a bunch of other stuff as well as an interview. Like there's so many hurdles. But yeah, sorry. So you asked about if I get all the jobs I go for. No, I don't. And I think one of the things is I went through this. Have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
I've got it. That's all I
Okay,
can
okay,
say.
okay, okay.
I haven't finished it.
Okay. That book went through its rounds. I don't when was it released? I can't even
I think early
remember.
2000s,
Yeah,
I
it was
think.
because I'm like,
Yeah.
I think that because I'm like, I read it. I think I read it 2006. I remember I think I was even in Hounslow at the time, and I was on. This is when get rich quicks type stuff and like the whole
Yeah.
the grind set thing. The whole mindset thing was not cheesy. It was not considered corny. It was
Yeah.
brand new. And Robert Kiyosaki and even Donald Trump, like you wouldn't
Yeah,
think
he
of it
had
today,
books. Yeah.
but in those days, rappers would rap about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki was, collaborating with him. And there was a certain, I think it was also when The Secret came out and the whole law of attraction thing. Again,
Yeah.
it wasn't cheesy or corny at the time. It was brand new. And I was like, this is amazing. And I started to get really into non-fictional books. And I started reading loads of books and I started reading about this is what's a successful mindset. And like now it sounds kind of cheesy but I'm like, at the time it was like,
Yeah.
it was groundbreaking stuff. It was brand new. And I got all the books and I read the Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, all of the stuff. And I started to, I saw the patterns in some of the stuff that they were saying. And although some of these things have turned out to be a little bit like they were doing it to sell stuff, there is an element of truth in a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff as well. To me, I still believe in a lot of that stuff, and I realize that repositioning or reframing something so that you can get the most productive results
Yeah.
is absolutely key. And I realize that if I spend too long dwelling on things or I don't reframe things in the way that I need to get like a specific thing, I'm not saying that, I'm not talking about toxic positivity where something's clearly wrong, but you're telling everyone to smile and you're like, I'm fine, I'm happy. Like, I don't mean that. I don't agree with that. I think if you sometimes you feel bad and you just need to sit in that and go
Yeah.
through that. Um, but discovering the kind of reframing was really important
Okay.
in my journey, and it
Yeah.
helped me to um like if I didn't get a job, I kind of forgot that I didn't get that job. I'd move on so
Right.
fast in my head
Okay.
that I didn't even remember some of them.
Mhm.
Um
Okay.
yeah, it was but also I started to notice that my conversion rate went up. So my
Okay.
interviews to offers. So it was like I was instead of going to like 5 or 3 interviews, it was like I'd go to 1 interview and pretty much get 1
And get
offer.
that one.
And so as that started to happen more and more frequently, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm confident that I'm confident now and I'm confident that I've got this skill.
Okay. So you developed a skill. And actually this kind of and I like the fact that you mentioned reframing, reframing it in a way that I guess resonates with the person you're speaking to. And I guess different people have different because there's I don't know if you've ever felt this, but there's some interviews you can just tell the vibe of somebody. And I
Yep.
don't know if you agree with this or you think that is there do you think there's some like people on the other side, they've just got that attitude of like the next person that's coming in, you know,
Mm,
you just don't quite vibe with them. Even if you're saying the right things, the vibe is not there. So therefore, because like I guess everything's a people business, really, right? Even if you are the right candidate, you're saying the right things on a people perspective.
mm.
If they don't get that energy, there's a possibility that
That you won't, yeah. But I
yeah,
think you also have to, as a candidate, I would say to anyone that thinks that, you'd also have to think to yourself, do I want to work with someone that I don't vibe with? Or that I'm throwing off the best I can and they're giving me something back that feels a bit off?
yeah,
I'd probably recommend you don't. If the person interviewing you is the person you'd be working with, and normally it is. I've accepted jobs like that before, more than once, because it took me a while to learn important lessons. And it was just misery,
yeah,
like, just straight misery. In one case, I I couldn't understand after I left that place why that person hired me, because they didn't really seem to like me. And I realized that why they did it was their manager thought I really liked me. And so
right,
I think they just thought, I need someone who can deliver. This person can deliver, but they didn't really. They just had a personal issue. I didn't know what it was when I remember starting in that job, and they were, I can't remember, but they kind of shouted something across the office and was like telling me off for not doing something. And when I sat down, there were two people on my desk, two of my colleagues, and they said, like, why does that person talk to you like that? Why are they so harsh with you? And they were like, yeah, like, what's that about? And I'm like, I don't know. I've literally been here 3 days. And I remember having that discussion and thinking, what is going on here? I don't know. But yeah, it just didn't last. It just didn't last, because that went on for a short time before,
yeah,
my personality, I wouldn't take that lying down.
yeah,
And it meant that within a week I had been like, I'd snapped back at that person.
okay,
And then they were like, oh, they took me aside and was like, oh, why was you responding like that in front of the whole office? And I was like, you've been off with me since I joined. And so I was like, I'm not staying. And the strange thing about that discussion, the weirdest thing about it was that um like, they looked really upset by that, which was so weird to me. At the time, I couldn't understand it. Now I do. Now I'm older, but um, I remember she looked like she was gonna cry. This is my boss, and I was like, "Oh," and she was like, "Okay," and so she was like, "Are you sure you want to leave? Is there anything we can do to keep you?" And I was so confused by the mixed signals.
wow,
And then she said, "Do you want to go now, or do you want to wait?" And I was like, "I want to go now." I realized after that the reason that happened is she a lot of people worked there in this really awful environment, and um the managers there were used to people just sticking with it, so they weren't used to people being like, screw this, I'm
mm,
leaving.
right,
People didn't really do that.
mm,
But in my head, I knew I could go into another job. So I was
yeah,
like, I'll just find a better job where I don't get treated like this. And she knew that also when I resigned, her manager, who really wanted to see me in that job, she'd have to explain to them why I left that quickly. And she knew that manager would speak to me.
okay,
And that's what happened. And I don't know what happened. I think a few other people complained about this person and they ended up being let go like 6 months later.
hmm,
But I don't think it was just related to me, but I think that didn't help. So yeah,
wow,
yeah,
wow, okay. That is, yeah, that's gosh, work life is can be a bit crazy.
yeah.
I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned before, and again, another thing that again I I didn't really think about. And I could probably admit that I probably do this. I probably would say that I've got different voices for different things, right?
Yeah,
I probably have a podcast. I might have a podcast voice. I don't know. And I think I have a work voice for sure. I
yeah.
definitely for sure have a work voice to my normal voice. And we were talking about it. Do you think people should spend time on working on their work voice? And I don't mean like for the purposes of work itself, but for the purposes of interviewing, because of what one of your somebody from your audience was talking about accent. Again, it's not something I was even really paying attention to, because I've worked with
Mm,
people with different accents and thought I've never really thought anything of it.
mm,
If you're good at your job and you do what you need, that doesn't
yeah.
uh,
But
to me that doesn't matter really. But
I think that so you might have heard of this before. Been
yeah,
this study, I think it was done by Harvard, about putting out a CV with like it's the same CV,
The-
but they put like African names,
Yeah.
Indian names, and then or
Yeah.
typically Indian names, typically African names, and then typically British names.
Yeah.
And it went down in percentage, but I think the CVs with the black names were the least likely to get a callback. And it was something like 1 in 10 callbacks or something, whereas the CV with the typically British name was something else. And that's kind of the same for when you meet people. I think it's something that happens, or from what I've read anyway, it's something that happens subconsciously where you make an immediate assessment on someone based on like it's like a I don't know, it's like a 2 or 3 second thing, or they say that I think it's like a 7 second rule or something like that. And um it also depends on the way they sound. As soon as someone opens their mouth to speak, there's something there's something that you associate with that sound, because that's how we're wired. We kind of make associations as soon as we learn something new. We associate it or try to connect it with something that we understand. Um, and so people with accents. So I I can understand that why the sound of my voice might be more palatable to somebody who's grown up here, indigenous to here, and is used to working with, hiring with people from here and understands what success looks like. And all of the successful people in their company sound and act and look like this. And so someone that's close to that is what they are used to. And so subconsciously, they might not realize that that's the reason that they connect with me more. But, you know, there are some people where like I think it's also the cultural differences. So there was a woman that I worked with, an African woman. She was a finance manager, and her style was what would be considered in that corporate environment a bit more abrupt than the usual. I loved working with her. I loved that style because she got to the point.
Yeah.
She didn't mess around. She just told you how it was, but it was cultural
Yeah.
for her. There's a cultural difference in Britain, it's particularly in the corporate environment, of saying things that are slightly different to what you mean,
Yeah.
reframing certain things. The corporate speak, let's take that offline. Blue sky thinking, da 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 da. All these words that they don't mean what you. It burns me a little. So in one of my recent roles for a large company, they were having a focus on diversity, and they asked me about like my experience, and I said that's fine. I don't mind talking to you about my experience and whatever. Like from the black perspective. And I said, one of the things that I would recommend that you scrap is this. I won't use the company name, but this work speak. So they use the company name and they called it that speak. And I was like, this work speak is alienating to people who are not from this culture, who don't sound like me. They might look a bit like me, but they don't sound like me. It's alienating, and it serves no purpose, because there are already words to describe those things if you just say what you mean. You don't need to use corporate speak. That adds a layer of me saying to you, we understand what we're talking about. We're from the same environment, and it's alienating to people who don't understand that. And I'm trying to remember a few of the phrases, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. And it was just, I'm trying to remember. It was really like, they have them in most corporate companies. And I think that type of thing can be the difference, and
Yeah.
someone else not understanding why they're using that, and someone coming into an interview and just not using that. It's why you get like people in parliament that have all gone to Eton. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? They sound
Yeah.
a certain way. Do you know what I mean? There's maybe a 1% more diversity now, but you know, it's there's a certain familiarity, and they know, oh, he went to so and so, I know that they'll do this. Like managers have said to me before, we want someone with a 2.1 from a red brick university for that role. And I'm like, but this is entry level. Like, why do they need that? Like, why would they need that? And it's like, oh, but I just know that someone that comes in from that university, they're going to be a certain caliber. And I just thought, there's a lot that they're not saying there, because all the people that come from that university have almost identical background. They look almost the same. They sound almost the same. So you're not specifically saying that you don't want this set of people over here, but by default, you are alienating those people
Yeah.
by doing that. So yeah, in terms of people working on their work speak, I would love to say like, no. My view is actually it's more about articulation than it is about your work voice.
Okay.
So how can I explain it? I think it's more about the words that you say and the way you explain things can have an impact no matter your accent.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're able to articulate, kind of articulate certain things in a way that is persuading, in a way that is convincing, most people can't kind of sidestep that. They can't ignore the fact that you said that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been more about articulation. I've had a million appraisals and performance reviews over the years, and I've been told, oh, but sometimes your style, it's a little direct. And I might say, sure, I'll work on that. Because I'd like my bonus, but I'm me, and I'm me, and I'm not going to. There are certain things that I believe have helped me forward, and there are certain things I just don't want to change. There's certain things I'm just stubborn about, and I'm like, this is me. I don't want to be indirect and say something that I don't really mean. That's just no.
Okay. Cool. No, it heard. I hear you on that. I hear you on that. And this is more of a generous question, but it's more about what tips would you have for somebody if they're thinking about standing out in an interview? Because I guess right now, we were talking about a potential recession. We were talking about no matter what the time, still apply to jobs, but there's going to be more competition, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you stand out. What tips would you have for somebody if they wanted to think about standing out in an interview?
First tip: subscribe to my channel. Amri
Okay,
Celeste, interview
cool.
coach. No, but seriously, I think that there's a few basic things, and they're not actually that difficult. Strangely enough, what a lot of people struggle with, or what they've told me, is actually confidence over prep. Which is I found shocking, because I don't cover confidence on my channel. So I was surprised to hear that so much of my audience was struggling with that. But it helps me to understand what kind of content they want to see. So that was really helpful. But in terms of basic tips for people that are going to an interview, the number one thing is to make sure that you prepare. And how you prepare makes all the difference nowadays. Once upon a time, just preparing would have put you above like 90% of other candidates. But nowadays, a lot more people are aware of that. So I go through quite a long kind of in-depth process. But in terms of off the top, I would say make sure that you speak your answers out loud. When you're sitting in an interview, that shouldn't be the first time that you're hearing your answer. And record yourself, because
Okay.
I don't know about you,
Never
but
done that.
oh yeah, we definitely
Never
do it.
done that.
When you listen back to yourself for the first time,
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but it was a horrible experience for me. So I was like,
It was horrible for the
Yeah.
YouTube channel. Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
why do I sound like that? Why didn't anyone tell me I sounded like that? And what's wrong with the equipment? Because I genuinely thought the camera's obviously not picking up what I'm sounding like.
Yeah.
So the equipment must be broken. I was actually blaming the camera, when really all it was that I was hearing what everybody else heard. And so it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but it was very uncomfortable. And it meant that I could tweak how I sounded until I was comfortable. You need to do that so that when you get into your interview, they're hearing what is a polished product, instead of you umming, erring, not being sure, thinking, oh, I shouldn't have said that. So you need to practice, speak your answers. And in terms of what to practice, you want to make sure that you read the job description. Don't just read it, study it, and match your skills with the relevant parts of the job description. Please do that. And
Sorry, I'm interjecting a
no,
little
go ahead.
slightly there.
Go ahead.
So I actually had a question about this. Some people will apply. They might have maybe 5 out of 7 on it. And you can think about this answer. Do you think that's a wise thing, or should they be getting 7 out of 7 before they go for it?
As in matching everything on the job description?
Yeah.
No, because it's not, you may just not have a certain skill. So if you don't have it, that's fine.
Okay.
All you're doing is looking for the areas that match.
Okay.
Most people, I confidently tell you, don't do that.
Okay.
And that is one of the key things that you need to do, because otherwise, when they ask you a question like, why should we hire you? What's most important to you? What are your key skills? You're kind of shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
Like, you could be like, I like people. I'm a people person.
Yeah.
Is that in the role?
Yeah.
Because if it's not, then
It's true.
You want to make sure you're focusing on things like, when you say what are your key skills, if there's something in the job description that says you need to be somebody that is you need to have advanced level Excel skills. You need to be somebody who understands how to work in a team. You need to be, these, and you actually have those skills, then those are the ones you want to focus on.
Okay.
Forget the others. Forget the time that you won a cake baking competition. Forget the time that you were, head of a student body thing in university. They are things that you're proud of, but the interviewer doesn't care.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
I'm so sorry to say this. I'm like, there are some things that people are really proud of, and I'm hesitant in how I explain to them that doesn't matter. That it's completely irrelevant. And don't waste time on those things, because the interviewer won't remember everything you said off the top of their head. So you need to make sure that everything hits a punch. So everything that they remember is a reason to hire you. So yeah, if you only meet 4 out of 7, that's fine. Just make sure that you're clear on what those 4 out of 7
Right.
are.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
look at things like the company's LinkedIn page,
Mhm.
the news feed. Look at public things like their social media. Like, oh, I noticed that the company just did this. I noticed that you've had a new manager in your department. I noticed that normally helps. It depends on what level of role you're going for.
Yeah.
If you're going for entry level, you don't need to do as much. Whereas if you're going for director level, you better understand legislation in the industry. You better understand everything.
Better,
Do you know what I
right?
mean? You really do, because if I'm interviewing you, then you better know all that stuff. But generally speaking, you just want to make sure that you do those things. I don't expect, when I'm interviewing people, like whether it be at work or interviewing a client,
Yeah.
I don't expect them to have done all of that, because I know that most people don't. As in my view as an interviewer, so someone that's been an HR representative and a recruitment person, I like to make people feel comfortable, because in my mind, I want to find the right person. I never understand interviewers who want to trip up the candidate. I'll never understand that.
Boiler room type stuff, right?
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
I
yeah.
get it. Like you're in a dingy dark room and they're like
It's
trying to
Yeah,
intimidate
they're trying to
you.
interrogate you. Some
Yeah.
people are like that. I don't get it, but I do get that people are like that. So I want to prep my clients for that type of
Yeah.
interviewer.
Okay. Wow. Fantastic tips. And obviously you sat on the other side. So what are some things that you shouldn't do? Absolutely. Like even if it's a great interview, it's just gonna kill your chances.
Don't be overly familiar.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with complimenting the interviewer if you like them, but be aware of that as well. Just be aware of of feeling so relaxed that you then share something that is, that maybe you shouldn't share. So try to keep things relevant to the role. If you are going to share anything personal, think about the types of personal things that you can share, so that when that moment comes up, you can reference a book you read, this or that, rather than going out drinking. Or going out drinking is fine. I don't judge people for doing that, but some interviewers might. And if you really, really want that job, it could lose you the opportunity.
Yeah.
There was a guy who, I mean, I don't know if he'd want to work there anyway, but his interviewer didn't like the fact that he had Burberry socks on.
What?
Yeah, I've heard all sorts of stuff.
That doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. Can't he? Okay.
I think he was going for one of those, those
Yeah.
banks in the city where you need to open
Yeah.
an account with a minimum of 4 million.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of place. So I think he might have been interviewed somewhere like that. I'm trying to remember it was now, but
Company
the
like that
Burberry
needs to
socks,
get
and I was
shut
like,
down.
but do you know what I'd say to the guy? Go neutral, wear black socks.
Yeah.
Don't do
Burberry
too much.
socks, what's wrong with that?
For whatever reason, the guy didn't like it, and I'm like, you might not have wanted to work somewhere with someone that was that fussy.
Yeah,
You might have wanted to
probably.
work with him anyway. But either way, just try to go neutral. One thing I would also avoid, I actually said this the other day. I can't remember. I think it was a client that I had, and I was advising them not to mention death. So I know that sounds really.
Right,
So
okay.
in an example, I think we would. Oh yeah, I remember what it was. So we're talking about an example to the question, something like, how do you manage challenges or conflict or something?
Yeah.
And they were talking about, I think it was the biggest achievement. What's your biggest achievement? And they were saying that their biggest achievement is working through something when someone passed away. And so I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It can be a tremendous achievement, especially if you're doing multiple things, like you're studying, looking after someone, and all of these different things are happening. However, when you mention things like bereavement, you don't know what is a trigger for the person interviewing you. So some things might be difficult or traumatic for them to hear. And so because of that, try to steer away from things like death, things like political opinions.
Mhm.
Steer away from that. I had a client who liked Donald Trump, and I was like, "That's fine. Are you sure that your interviewer likes Donald Trump?" Because they were saying to me, "But my view is that it shouldn't matter." And I was like, "Maybe not, but if it matters to the person that's making the decision, then you may not get the job, because some people will see some things that people do politically. They'll look at how it impacts their day-to-day lives and think, how could you support that person? Or they might have a million different views. Try to keep things as professional and neutral as you can, while still showing your personality, which can be difficult. But that's one of the reasons why I talk about practice. It's a bit of an art, and as you've practiced, once you do it a few times over, you'll start to get the hang of understanding how to show enthusiasm, how to
Yeah.
show your personality without sharing things that are too controversial. So it's the main things are: stay away from controversial topics, and make sure that and don't just go in without preparing. Just that's my main thing, is just make sure that you are prepped for the interview.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. Um, there is a just very quickly on this one. You do have a format to, and actually you can tell me if this format's still relevant. There's a star format, right?
Yeah.
To thinking about your answers to questions and preparing. Is that still relevant in today's? Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yeah.
Can you explain star quickly? What
Yeah,
that
so
means?
STAR is an acronym for situation, task, action. It's acronym? May not be, but
Mm.
basically it stands for situation, task, action, result. And it's a way of structuring your answer. You put your answer into a structured framework to make sure that you give a comprehensive example. So let's say somebody said, "Can you give me an example of a time when you disagreed with someone at work?" Or when, whatever. You're telling them the situation. So what happened? The task. So what did you need to do? What was the task that was created out of that situation? What were the actions that you took? And what was the ultimate result?
Yeah.
The reason it's important is because often that's what the interviewer wants to know. They want to know what was the positive outcome, if there was one, and if there wasn't one, why, or what did you learn? They're waiting to hear that. When people are nervous, they often go off on tangents and forget completely what they're saying.
Mm.
It happens all the time in interviews. So the STAR method helps you to remember, right, what am I talking about?
Yeah.
And keep your answer concise, but also hit those points that the interview is waiting to hear.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic explanation. I've got like two more questions that I want to ask you. And I feel like it's always awkward for me to think about that, because I think people always ask this question. One is, tell me about yourself. People always think, like, what am I supposed to tell you about
Yeah.
myself? So how can someone tackle that question?
Do you know what? I kind of love and hate that question, because it's vague for a reason.
Yeah.
Some interviewers intentionally ask that because it's vague, and some of them just ask that because they think it's a question that they should ask. I do have a kind of a format recommendation for that, but um this is the thing, that there's so many different ways. There's no hard and fast rule. My view is you start off with your why. So you start off with why you do what you do. If you're not already in the industry, so you're a graduate going into it for the first time, why you want to be in that industry. So I have a passion for this because of this. I want to go into this area because I've always been interested in detail. I'm analytical. I'm numerically this and that. That's why I'm interested in this role. That's why I have a passion for it, or I've always enjoyed speaking to people. Um, and then you move into what you're currently doing. So it start off with, I've always been passionate about connecting with people. That's why I have started a career in customer service. And then you go into, I've now been in customer service for 3 years now, and I do this, this, and this. So this answer is important to structure, because you can hit key points and absolutely nail it this way. So you can hit like 2 hard skills, 2 soft skills, and 2 key skills. And so you can say like, so in that I'm involved in dealing with customer complaints and feedback, doing this and this. I also worked on this project. I've done these number of things. These are my key skills here that are relevant, and that's why that's really a summary of me.
Mhm.
And then I always end that answer. I always recommend people end that answer with, and that's why I applied. So
Mm,
you come back, we
okay.
bring it back round. So at the end of it, you're saying da 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 da. And
Yeah.
the combination of those skills is the reason that I applied, because I saw that in the role you wanted this.
Wow.
And then
Epic.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's I love structuring the answer that way, because it's neat, it's packaged, it gives people a structure to work to, but it also, like, in my mind, I've not met a client that hasn't, where the interviewer hasn't had some kind of specific reaction to them
Yeah.
structuring it that way.
That's fantastic. Wow, that's fantastic. I could ask you questions all day, but yeah, I can't keep you here all day. Another one that sometimes I'm just like, oh, maybe not thought about it because that's not why you applied to the job, or maybe you just don't have no aspiration. What are your long-term career goals? What you
Oh,
want to do
that's
in five
interesting.
years? Yeah.
So long-term career goals. So I have answered this on my channel, but
Yeah, I
no,
know.
no, I
That's
just putting it out
no,
there.
no, I
Okay,
know.
yeah,
That's
just
what
putting
I'm
it out
asking
there.
you.
But no, but I think long-term career goals. It depends on what you want. So
Mm,
a lot of people think that they should say that they want to get promoted or they want to move up. Don't say that if you don't want to, because if you say that, there's a high chance that you'll be expected to perform in a way that demonstrates that you want to get promoted, and that often means going above and beyond your role. So sometimes it's just about saying that you want to do the role that you applied for. That's your long-term career goal. And a lot of managers like to hear that because that's the role they're hiring for.
yeah.
Some managers can be put off by someone that wants to move too quickly. Um, so unless there's an indication that they want someone ambitious in the job description, or there's an indication that, for example, there are certain industries like sales or certain types of recruitment, like agency recruitment, where they want people to be ambitious. They want them to have an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
And so you saying something like that is what they want to hear. And if you don't say it, it could also have the opposite effect. It
Okay.
can, but generally speaking, it's what you want. So if you're somebody that you're like, I kind of just want to get into this role and study, then you say that to them. You say, my long-term career goals are, for now, I would say I can't speak for 5 to 10 years, but I know that for the next few years, I would love to do this role. I want to get in it. I want to understand it. I want to nail it. I want to learn from the rest of the team. I noticed that you have these people on the team. Like I always like to reference specific things. So when I'm coaching someone, I'm like, look at the LinkedIn, reference those things and say, I would love to work in that team because I think that I can learn X and X.
Yeah.
And really those are my career goals for now. Perhaps in future I might like to move up to this and that, but to be honest, I'd like to see where I am at that time.
Okay.
If you want to move up, then make sure that you work that into your answer as well.
Okay. Wow. So, like I said, I could ask you questions all day. Fantastic. Thank you so much. What do you have planned next for yourself?
For me, it really is just about trying to just give us more value to my audience
Yeah.
and making sure that I think that's pretty much it. I always wanted to keep it simple. When I started my channel, I put career coach, I think, and I changed it to interview coach because I realized that I'm not a career coach. I'm just an interview coach, and that's what I really actually I enjoy. Like, I can talk about it with enthusiasm because I like it. I really like doing it, and I like seeing the difference when people comment and say like, "I just got my first six-figure job." I'm like, that's amazing. Like, I feel good. And I'm like, right, I want to create more content like that. I want to get more people into jobs like that.
Yeah.
Um, because I'm like, I want to level this playing field, because the people that are shy or they're not the most outspoken, sometimes they can be at a bit of a disadvantage. And I'm like, you actually don't need to be, as long as you know
Yeah.
what to say. It's not, you don't have to have the same personality as everybody else, but you just need to know how to sell your strengths.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just about focusing on this, growing this, and just getting more, I guess, more advice out to people who need it.
Amazing, amazing. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Amri. So much value, so much value. Where can people actually find you?
Now on Instagram. So
Okay, you're on Instagram
I'm
now.
such a
Okay.
technophobe. That's why, like, I didn't even have an Instagram when I joined
And
the
you got to
Creator
get on
Cast.
TikTok.
Yeah, I know. Do you know, I actually started TikTok. I haven't posted any videos.
Okay.
I've been so busy, but next week is fairly free, and I'm hoping
Yeah.
that I can actually get my first video out on TikTok.
Yeah.
Although TikTok is apparently being banned in a lot of places.
They might ban it in the US, but I think regardless,
Yeah, I mean, it's still
it's
really powerful.
yeah, it's still
But
powerful. It's quite
I
big.
still need to have a presence on there. But I'm just keeping an eye on what's going on. But yeah, TikTok, it's always going to be Amri Celeste. Amri Celeste on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Amri Celeste on Instagram, Amri Celeste on YouTube, and just Amri Celeste.
Amazing, amazing. No, really appreciate you coming down today. You came all the way down from Watford.
I know.
Listeners, watchers, just appreciate Amri. Came from far to provide a lot of value, and I learned a lot, to be honest, from this conversation. I will say I'm doing pretty well in my career, and I wouldn't even say that I've done some of the tips that
No,
you've
no,
done.
no.
Yeah,
See,
no,
that's
no,
the thing.
and
You don't even, yeah. I mean,
uh,
you're well spoken,
yeah,
and do
yeah,
you know what I mean? There's just a certain,
yeah.
yeah. It's
No, I'm
yeah,
not saying.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
saying if I had gotten your tips, I might have even been way, way ahead. Honestly, I might have been way ahead. So no, it's been so insightful. Do you have any final words for the audience?
Well, I first of all, I just want to thank you for inviting
Yeah,
me because it's been really interesting discussion.
yeah,
Like, I feel like I could have, we could just talk about so many things.
yeah.
Um, but I think just parting words are, from an interview coach perspective, there's a lot going on in society right now in terms of recessions, redundancies. Try not to get disheartened. Like, it's everything works in cycles and waves. So all you need to do is stick to what you really want, stay focused on that, put some time, and a bit of effort into preparing and studying the thing that you want to get into and how to do that. And you will absolutely fly in your career. That's pretty much it from me. So
Amazing,
yeah.
amazing, amazing, motivational, inspirational. You heard it yourself from Amri. So yeah, thank you, watchers and listeners, for tuning into this episode of the Take Off Experience. Really appreciate you, and we'll see you in next week's episode.